Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 372 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is goals versus resolutions. Our quote of the day comes to us from Tony Robbins. Setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. If you have yet to subscribe to our show or leave us a review, we would love it if you could please take 2 minutes and do that. That really and truly helps us get our message out to a much wider audience. And lastly, we would like to thank you for being part of our Team No Quit Tribe. And thank you so much to our incredible listeners that have and continue to share our podcast with others. Thank you. One of our favorite topics to discuss and dissect is goal setting. And with 2023 right around the corner, I figured this could be an informative episode for our listeners. Where do you stand on setting resolutions? Do you believe in them? Do you set New Year's resolutions every single year? And if so, how do you do when it comes to making your resolutions come to fruition? Or do you set resolutions every now and then? Or perhaps you only set goals when someone else reminds you to. Now, I want to be very clear. I'm a believer and a supporter of both setting goals as well as setting resolutions. However, I also would like to say that I think there's a very significant difference between the two, especially in how and why you go about setting them. To be fully transparent with our listeners, there have been many times in my life when January 1st has come around and by default, I felt I needed to set some resolutions, so I have. Candidly, during those times, I think I set some resolutions because I was supposed to, because it's what you're supposed to do to kick off that new year. Now, I have some interesting statistics that I would like to share about resolutions. According to Forbes, nearly 80% of people admitted to abandoning their New Year's resolutions by February every year. And for those that do set resolutions, 23% quit in that first week, and only 9% successfully keep their New Year's resolutions. Now, I don't share those quotes to try and influence you not to set resolutions, but instead to encourage you to think a little bit differently about why you did them. Instead of setting them just because you feel you're supposed to, what if you tried to be more intentional with why you are setting resolutions and then ultimately took another day or two to evaluate the ones that you do set? One thing or area where I feel there is a disconnect is that thinking this year is going to be different than last year just because. To me, that is where the law of attraction often falls short. The first step is 1,000% believing it, thinking it, and I truly find and believe that there is so much value in seeing that vision in your mind first. But you need to ultimately go ahead and take action. Seeing, believing, and feeling something is a huge first step, an incredibly important part of the process. But the immediate next step is the action you are going to take. I think people often overestimate that first step and sometimes completely neglect that second step. So what are you going to do different in 2023? What are you going to commit to this year that you didn't do last year? If you fell short in one area last year when it comes to setting your goals or your resolutions, what are you going to do about it? With that in mind, I urge everyone to reflect on this past year and the goals and resolutions that you did set, the ones you accomplished, and maybe where you fell short. We have talked about the professional golfer Ben Crane and his 3 reflection questions on past episodes. And I want to bring them up again because I think it can help in regard to today's topic and the goals and resolutions that you set for 2022. His 3 questions are, number 1, what did you do well? Number 2, what did you learn? And number 3, what are you going to do about what you learned? Think about those 3 reflection questions as you look back on your past year. What did you do well, and how can you duplicate or possibly even improve those things this coming year? And what did you learn? And from those things you did learn, what are you going to do about it? What are you willing to do about it? And what are you going to do differently in 2023 with what you learned over this past year? If you're thinking about possibly setting goals for 2023, but you are not sure where to start, I'd like to offer a suggestion. This is something that not only do I use myself, but it's something I utilize with my clients as well. You might have heard of the acronym SMART when it comes to goals, but if not, I'll quickly break down that SMART acronym. The S is for specific. The first step is to be very specific with the goals you set. And in this regard, the more specific, the better. It is important to also make sure you avoid setting those general or vague goals. The M is for measurable. The goals you set need to be measurable so you can identify where you are. Are you ahead of schedule, on schedule, or perhaps you're behind schedule when it comes to accomplishing those goals? The A is for attainable. It is so key and so important to set those lofty goals that push you and stretch you, but statistics show that if you feel your goals are not something that you can actually accomplish, the likelihood of you sticking to those goals, especially when things get challenging, diminishes significantly. The R is for relevant. Your goals need to be relevant to you personally. When it comes to setting goals, either personally or professionally, it is often a positive when you speak to other people and get either their feedback or input regarding your goals. But if your goals are more relevant to someone else than they are for you, that is a good sign that more likely than not, those are probably not the right goals for you. And the last letter, T, is for time bound. You need to have a beginning and an end when it comes to your specific goal. That allows you to gauge where you are along the process and also helps you to recognize those small wins and adjustments that are needed along the way. I have a couple points to add that I think might help you along the way to setting and ultimately accomplishing your goals or resolutions. Many people have identified that some of the best goals that they have set and accomplished are those truly challenging goals. The goals that might actually scare you a bit, but the ones where you know you will need to get outside your comfort zone if you're going to accomplish them. Something else that works for people in regard to goal setting is to take into consideration those things that you can't get out of your mind. Now, new goals obviously can sometimes come out of the blue, but what about those things that you are constantly thinking about or maybe sharing with somebody else? There are so many incredible apps out there, but for me personally, I think much better with a pen and paper in my hand. If you have not tried this, or if maybe you're stuck with either your goals or your resolutions, perhaps try putting some thoughts down on paper. For me, it doesn't happen instantaneously, but usually within a couple of minutes, my ideas and thoughts start to flow. I'm sure we've all heard about the value of your support system. Something we reference here often is the power of your tribe. Many of our guests have also mentioned accountability partners and how they've helped them both personally and professionally. That support system could also come in the form of a coach, mentor, coworker, or even a family member or friend to help hold you accountable. There are plenty of statistics behind the power of verbally sharing your goals or resolutions with someone else, but then asking them to help you. And lastly, when it comes to goals, it is so important to reverse engineer those steps that will be needed along the way, those small wins and checkpoints. Some people reference stacking bricks, which might not seem huge in the moment, but when you stack a few of them together, you can see the impact it has on building that wall and ultimately accomplishing that goal. Now, don't let statistically high likelihood of failure put you off from making a New Year's resolution. At the very least, if you fail, fail forward. Learn from your experiences, and even if you don't achieve your goal, you will be closer than if you never ever tried. In conclusion, whether you set New Year's resolutions or goals, I challenge you to hold yourself more accountable as we head into the new year. Challenge yourself to think about making 2023 your best year ever, but do so by planning and taking action now, not on January 1st or January 2nd. If you decide on setting goals or resolutions, I urge you to think about why you are setting them, and when you do set them, try to be as intentional with setting the right ones for you. And lastly, if you're that person that has never set goals or New Year's resolutions, what if you tried something different this year? As I'm a big quote guy, I would like to end today's episode with one of my all-time favorites from Zig Ziglar that I think brings home today's episode nicely. You can't hit a target you cannot see, and you cannot see a target you do not have. Appreciate you listening to today's episode. Appreciate you being a part of our Team No Quit tribe. And remember, we rise by lifting others up.
And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.